Welcome back to another episode of the H3X podcast, where your hosts, Mark Goering and Dave Miller, discuss the head, heart, and hands of the multiplying church and our leaders. Mark, I want to say thanks for handling last week. I had a Covo blow up and I had to run into the store, and you handled it like a champ. And that's what good friends are for. Super excited. If y'all didn't catch that last episode, make sure you go back and get it. Mark shared some really, really good stuff. But today, we're going to jump into the idea. If you don't know what the end looks like, then you actually probably don't understand what the process needs. I'm going to tell a quick story to kind of set this up, Mark, to show you a moment in my life where it made all the difference in the world. And this was back in 2011 for me. And it is what set the trajectory of everything that I'm doing right now. So the simple is I got asked a question after I had posed an original question. I'm sitting down with a leader and I say to them, I don't think we're making disciples. And they said, well, why don't you think that? And then I gave my reasons. And then I said, well, what do you think making disciples looks like? They gave me their answer. And I said, I don't think that that's what the New Testament teaches. And the question that changed everything for me was when that leader looked back at me and said, okay, then what is a disciple? And I went, ah. I don't think I have an answer to that question.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that if I don't know what a disciple is, then I don't know how to make a disciple, because I got to know what done looks like in order for me to even understand how to get going in that. And so that's what we're going to discuss today, because that principle is not something that I just learned in that conversation in 2011, which radically changed the direction of my life over the next 15 years and beyond. But it has also been very much a part of what you've been learning in New York. Am I right?
Yeah, totally a part of what we've been learning. We are in a new city from where we got started in Oklahoma City, and that was some advice that a mentor gave to us: is you need to know what done looks like, what exit looks like as you're entering in, and it's been really important advice, Dave. So yes, 100% resonate.
So let's just kick it off and let's just go dive straight in. How does understanding your exit strategy, knowing when it's time to move on, why is that so important? Even before you're even starting or in the middle of you getting going. And I'll put a little caveat on the conversation as we get started. And that is, if you don't know exactly what done is, we also don't want to get done with this podcast and put you in a limbo phase where you never actually obey, because it is okay to learn what done means after you get started. But we do think that the idea of getting clarity on done is important enough that you should learn as you're trying, right? So with that little caveat, it's not saying if you don't know what exit is, don't start. That's really goofy. But on the flip
Yeah.
side of it, how important is that exit strategy, Mark?
I think it matters a whole lot. I mean, the image that comes to my mind is less ministry spiritual than your example, which is great. It's that my kids love chocolate chip cookies, and so they're learning how to cook right now, and learning how to jump in and make those chocolate chip cookies, how to add the ingredients, and work with mom, work with dad to make them. But if we just started having them chunk ingredients in and start trying to work on it, but they've never eaten a chocolate chip cookie. They don't know what it looks like, how long it needs to bake in the oven, all these kinds of things. It's either going to be just a burnt mess, a complete slop pile on the sheet. It doesn't work to start the process. On some level, I want them to learn just by doing it, but on some level, it doesn't work unless they know what's the chocolate chip cookie look like, what's it taste like that we're aiming for. And so I guess that's the metaphor that comes to my mind is with anything in life, you've got to know when you've reached the goal so that you can make all those little decisions along the way to get to the goal.
Well, and for me, even though my disciple example was a little bit more spiritual, what I've come to understand is that I'm never going to truly, completely fulfill a disciple to the point at which they're like, okay, now they're reached perfection and they're just like Christ. Like
Yeah.
that's a goofy kind of thing. But what I have found is that no structure at all pretty much doesn't get you anywhere.
Right.
Too much structure means that you overpower somebody and you never empower a disciple. And so you've got this tension that's going to happen where you've really got to find where's a good radical middle ground to where you're going to say, we know what we want to develop. I'm not going to give somebody everything that they need. And so you and I dropped back to, and we started using the language of starter tools. What are the core concepts? What are the core practices? What are the core principles? What are the core knowledge base that somebody is going to have, the head, heart, and hands that someone is going to have to be able to be then released and empowered to grow in community, in partnership with someone else? But they have the basics, those core skills that they need to really do the job and to do it well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that we have used over the years to just summarize that up, Dave, is either it's sometimes we'll use it in the individual, the loss to leader is what that looks like, or we'll also talk about it in the church. And we just had a recent podcast, right, on is it do we focus on disciples? Do we focus on churches? It's yes, yes. So is it lost the leader or is it zero to church? Both of those help us to understand it's a process statement, but it's also defining success. We're looking for leaders, and that leads to like, well, what is a leader? Which is a good next question. And zero to church. What does it mean to get to church? And just by having those two statements in front of us, it starts to dial us in, right, to what is the end goal and what does success look like?
Yeah, and to your point, I think if you don't have the definition, so let's just use loss to leader for an individual's disciple making pathway, and let's use zero to church as our language for planting churches. And in our last podcast, we're saying yes, yes. You got to
Right.
focus on church and you got to focus on disciple making in order to get community and leadership development to happen. They have to be going at the same time. If I understand and define, here's what we mean by the basic of church. We are at church when we get to this. We are at leader when we get to this. Then here's the thing that I think makes the most difference. It causes us in the process to start making decisions on what's important and what is not. It allows us to stay focused in on vision, and it
Right.
allows us to stay focused in on intentionality. It allows us to be able to discern what should I be spending my time on, what should I not be spending my time on. And so here's the thing. We all have a priority conversation we have to have because we are all limited in some form or fashion. And that exit strategy, that definition of done, leader, and church helps us to know this is a pathway and things that we should be focusing on because I have to have these things in order to get there. And that clarity is incredible when it comes to high value activities, whenever it comes to prioritization, when it comes to all the things that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, and this is not a McDonald's franchise that we're talking about, Dave, where the definition of done looks like systems, it looks like an organization, it looks like profitability. Both of those examples, zero to church, lost to leader, are people. And I think at the end of the day, that should guide us as believers in how Jesus he defined his success as these 12 guys that were developed to the point that he could release and send them. We've seen that in John 17 that Jesus really dials into that idea. But his definition of success was not organizational or systems, it was people. And so that's an important piece of it. We can go and start doing this work, we can start making disciples. But if we're looking at how polished or how functional an organization metric of success is in that, we're going to miss it. So maybe that's an obvious contribution to this conversation is like, man, we got to focus on people as our understanding of where we're going.
It's interesting. Let's dive into that John 17 a little bit because whenever Jesus says he's done, um, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with those boys. Like, let's
Yeah.
just be honest. Um, we're still seeing Peter in the book of Acts. What is it like around chapter 7, I think, where he's still hesitant to go and talk to Gentiles,
Yeah.
right? And the Lord has to give him the vision and show him. And so we still see that Jesus is still actually working and training and discipling his own apostles through the Holy Spirit, through visions. You right, even the apostles who are speaking the word of God are still growing and developing. So, what is it about that chapter 17 of John do you think that allowed Jesus to say done? Because they weren't like actually finished. It wasn't like we had perfect apostles in John 17. So, what was it in your mind that made John 17, Jesus says, I am finished? What made it finished?
Yeah, so I'll read it real quick for us. So I when I read this, I look at John 17 verses 4 and 6 and I'll read those two verses. Verse 4 says, I have brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. And then down to 6, I have revealed you to those whom you have gave me out of the world, you. They were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have obeyed your word. So read that second verse one more time. I have revealed you to those who you gave out of the world. They were yours. You gave them to me, and they have obeyed your word. And so I think this is so interesting, Dave, because to your point, he hasn't gone to the cross yet, which is how we would uh, traditionally, theologically understand the finished work, him done. As we should. But in his own words here, he's saying, I have brought you glory on earth by finishing the work you gave me to do. So, in some sense, there was a work that he'd been entrusted with. He'd completed that. And he is saying these guys around the table have obeyed the word of the Father, and he has revealed the Father to them. So, in some sense, success looks like showing them the nature of God as Father and then giving them literal commands to obey and a model to obey until these guys seated around that table looked like, walked like, talked like, head, heart, and hands, Dave. It's our podcast, head, heart, and hands, that they had reached this point where they're obviously going to continue, like to your point, and make more mistakes. But there was a minimum of head, heart, and hands there, such that Jesus could say, "Yep, I have completed the work that you've given me to do."
I think, Mark, if I was to even kind of put some Dave words attached to it, I would say that the disciples understood their responsibility and took ownership of what Jesus had taught them,
Yeah,
and that they saw and understood that that responsibility then gave entrusted to them the opportunities of what was going to come next.
yeah,
And so for me, when you say, how do you really get to the point to where you know you have a leader or you have a church? Well, both of those are about people who are taking responsibility. Do I have
yeah,
a leader who says, I will own the work of disciple making? Well, you've got a leader on your hands, right? Where they're committed to it. And then a church, we will own the responsibility and the uh, rights of a church. Well, then you've got a church on your hands. And so for me, it really, really does come down to, have we developed an owner? And
yep,
by that, we don't mean someone who thinks they're in control of everything. We use stewardship to describe the servant leadership role. But Jesus has got these disciples and he's saying, I've completed the work. I've given them your word. And now I've got these 12 guys, well, 11 at that point, whenever one walks out. But he's like, I've got these guys who I know are going to go and take care of the mission that I'm going to give them. They're going to be able to repeat and do what I did, right? They weren't perfect, they had growth, but they were responsible.
yeah. I think there's some clear evidence that backs up what you're saying. If we go back just a few chapters back to John chapter 12, we see here this interaction that we've talked about multiple times on our podcast. But we see here that in John 12:20, there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request: Sir, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew. Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. And then he says, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces much fruit. And so I think we see here that they were seeing the expanse of the kingdom, the opportunities you're talking about. And Jesus was seeing in them some responsibility beginning to form around that. And they were bringing them, of course, to Jesus. And Jesus is saying, no, I'm going to die, like the grain of wheat falling to the ground, so that the fruit can begin to emerge. And Jesus needed to be able to, in that moment, see that these guys were taking that responsibility, and it was time to begin to pass it off, even though, like to your point, man, there are going to be a lot of mistakes and a lot of missteps along the way. That doesn't mean that they weren't qualified to pass the baton off.
Yeah, and I think this is where it gets a little bit sticky in the conversation, is because we're not just saying hands, right? If our definition of done, whatever it lands at, if our definition of done is they can do this, 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 and this, and then we make a list. We check off all the lists. Can they do the skills? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, 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 yes. And we're done. And you and I have seen multiple times where someone may have all the skills down, but they're not done because their hearts are so ugly that they could take those skills and then just wreck everything that they touch. They like leave destruction in their wake. They may have the skills, but they don't have it. And so that's what makes the conversation of zero lost to leader and zero to church kind of a harder understanding of what does exit actually look like, because we're not just looking for skills. We're also looking for knowledge. We're also looking for character. But that means our knowledge is never going to be complete. Our character is never going to really be complete. We're in process. We're constantly moving towards more and more and more, and our skills are only going to continue to grow. So,
Yeah.
oh, how do we get to that place to where we're going to say done? Because if we don't have a place to say done, then there's a whole lot of un ununderst what's the word I'm looking for? There's a whole lot of things that aren't going to be understood by the people who are participating,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it's really hard to get a guy to take responsibility or to get a guy to take ownership if they don't know that they've gotten to the place to where you expect that ownership. So we have to have something that says, go, you've got this, go do it. So how do you balance those things, Mark? What do you think?
Well, I can talk about it from the hand side and then also from the heart and head side. So I'll start with the hands. I think, in sort of a practical way, we've got to have a minimum goal of skills. And I personally use a mall checklist to a model assist watch launch checklist where we're going through each of the skills that a leader needs to have had modeled to them, assisted to them. They need to have gone through this process of seeing and doing those skills. But then the heart and the head part, to your point, we can get through the beginning of those skills within. I think we can get there within a month or two or three, usually with emerging leaders. If they're really actually practicing and doing it, you can get there within a few months, and you should even get to where you're getting to enough reps that they're seeing most of it. But then the heart and the head, that's time. And I just don't know that you get there apart from faithfulness worked out over time with little portions of responsibility entrusted to them where they are taking that on, they're reproducing the skills that they've learned and trying to do that with others, and we get to watch how they're faithful, get to pick them up when they fall and try again. But there's not a set length of time necessarily, but we can look at the ministry of Jesus. He had about 3 years with these guys, and that was pretty clearly intentional from Jesus. He I just wonder, Dave, how much of that really determined. And I think he's the son of God, so he's able to bring all these pieces together. But that was determining how he was able to show up in John 17 and say, "I've completed the work." It was not about, "Oh, I've got to hit this festival on this date." It worked out because he's God, but but it was about him bringing these guys through developmental process over time in their head, in their heart, and then of course their hands to the point where he had seen them take responsibility and work that out in smaller ways, and they were there.
Yeah, so two things I just want to point out. One is whenever we're talking about how we know we're done, attaching a timeline to it's never helpful.
Yeah.
I've got to be done in 3 months. That's just
Yeah.
not because people grow as fast as people are gonna grow, right? Old Chuck Wood saying, we had him on the podcast. People how long does it take a disciple to mature? It takes as long for disciples to mature as it takes a disciple to mature. That is, they
Yep.
go at their own pace. So I wanna kind of introduce a concept here that I think is helpful. We're not looking at how done is for the other person. We're looking at how done is for me. What is the irreducible minimum that this person has to have in relationship to me that I can give them what I have available? And then I know I'm done giving them what I have. And then the rest is going to be their responsibility. It doesn't mean our relationship ends. It doesn't mean that I'm not still walking with them. But what is that irreducible minimum that says this is leader? A leader has to have these things. A
Right.
church has to have these things at a base level in order for them to have what they need to continue themselves to grow and to mature and to excel in what they're doing. And I think the reason that we kind of avoid this exit conversation or avoid the done conversation is because it really is hard to simplify and to talk about what that irreducible minimum looks like. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to go back to my original conversation. 2011, I got asked the question, what is a disciple? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question. Now, if somebody says to me, what is a disciple? I'm going to draw for them the church waffle and I'm going to say, they've repented and believed, right? They've been
Yeah.
baptized. They've received the Holy Spirit. They're devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayers. God is doing many signs and wonders. He's doing the miraculous through their life, abundantly more than they could expect or imagine. Generosity is being practiced by them. Worship is an outflow of everything that they are, and they're multiplying disciples. Like now I can say to you, what is a disciple? And I can say, here is the core from Acts chapter 2 of what a disciple is. And that doesn't mean it's everything that a disciple will do, but I will tell you this, if they don't have these 12 things in their life, they're never going to become the disciple that they need to be. And so now I know done means I have taught them how to live out the church waffle as who they are and what they do. And if they've got that down as a habit in their life, I can say, I've given you what's necessary. Anything after that's just bonus, but I'm done. Like, I know that I've discipled you to something that is crucial. Does that mean I've finished everything? No. But that allows me to say, right? Does that make sense? That allows me to say, I'm done in the basics of disciple making with you. And that allows me to also know where I am in process. What does this person understand? What do they not understand? What do they need? What do they have already? What do they need to get better in? It gives me a framework to actually know what I need to be doing with this disciple. And it gives that disciple a framework to know what is it that they need to be working on in order to mature. It makes the relationship so much better. We know where we're headed together.
Yeah. And then the last piece I want to bring in, Dave, is I think I'm going to go back to my metaphor now. My kids have learned how to make chocolate chip cookies because primarily, and they got excited about it because they ate chocolate chip cookies. And what I have seen is once you can get to the first round of chocolate chip cookies, the next generation tastes it, they see it, and it's much faster for them to learn how to make it. So I'm stretching my metaphor a little bit, but as we're making disciples, when people can see the whole thing and they see what success looks like and they see what we're going for, it becomes more and more simple to actually point to what that can be and help others to step in and do it as well.
Yeah. So we just understand and that the exit, the moment of done is required for vision to live and thrive, right? It's required in order for us to have focus and enough structure to understand where are we? What are we doing? What needs to happen next? It lets you get clarity in the noise, right? Where you're not lost on where are we at. When I get together with somebody or I get a church together or we get in a coaching session or we're in a conversation, I know what we should be talking about. I know how to guide and direct this person. So it gives you vision. It gives you just enough structure to keep things going. And most importantly, it allows you to have that scenario to where the teaching, the training, the rebuking, the exhorting of the word of God can happen because you know what it is you're after. And that clarity, that simple clarity that we're talking about, is crucial in all of our conversation about high value activities, and it's a massively huge conversation. We can't
Yeah.
have it all today, but all of these things are tied into understanding what does done look like.
Yeah. Well, this has been, I think, really helpful, and it really is a good debrief of just even some of the things I've learned in my time in New York City. And I'm going to tie it back now. All of this began years ago for me, and just learning some simple tools to help people go from lost to leader. And guys, our next we do labs once a month. For 45 minutes, third Wednesday of the month. The next one we have coming up is on August 19, and it's on 4 questions or the 411 that a disciple needs to know to get started and really get them set up for you to be able to identify, is this somebody that is going to be that faithful practitioner that we can invest more into? This is how you'll find out. If you train them in these 4 questions, they begin to do it, the 411, then you'll begin to see, is this somebody to pour more deeply into? So join us for that. You can find that at covomultipliers.com. We'll put that in the description below. And hopefully we'll see you on that lab and take what you learned on this podcast episode and actually put it into practice so you can see the rubber meet the road. It's been good, Dave.
Yeah, perfect. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.